workers. The Department of Homeland Security will issue up to 15,000 visas allowing U.S. companies to hire temporary, non-agricultural workers, an announcement that comes as President Donald Trump has pushed a Hire American theme and at the start of the administration's Made in America Week. To qualify for the H-2B visas, hiring companies must attest under the penalty of perjury that they are likely to suffer irreparable harm without the influx of workers, the Department of Homeland Security's Monday announcement said. The additional visas are being allowed, the department said, because the annual, congressionally mandated allotment of 66,000 H-2Bs was reached last March, leaving some businesses without enough qualified and willing U.S. workers available to perform temporary non-agricultural labor. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly said in his department's statement that the additional visas are designed to help U.S. businesses. Congress gave me the discretionary authority to provide temporary relief to American businesses at risk of significant harm due to a lack of available seasonal workers, Kelly said. As a demonstration of the administration's commitment to supporting American businesses, DHS is providing this one-time increase to the congressionally set annual cap. The DHS announcement makes no mention of the White House's Made in America Week, expected to include a series of events highlighting American manufacturing. It is the first of a series of theme weeks announced by the White House, which will also include American Heroes Week and American Dreams Week. The influx of additional foreign workers into the U.S. labor pool appears to at least contrast with the president's regular campaign trail refrain that his White House would advocate in favor of Buy American, Hire American practices. Last April, Trump signed an executive order aimed at codifying his Buy American, Hire American pledge, ordering federal agencies to examine government practices and review all programs under which foreign workers enter the U.S. While the order extended to all visas, it mentioned only one by name, the H-1B visa, which allows companies to bring highly skilled employees into the U.S. At a briefing for reporters on the order, a senior Trump administration official said it would direct the Departments of Labor, Justice and Homeland Security to seek out and crack down on fraud and abuse in our immigration system in order to protect workers in the United States and their economic conditions. Trump's America First agenda imperils effort to rein in banks, EU lawmakers say. First it was free trade, then the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, European lawmakers are warning that President Donald Trump's anti-globalist agenda threatens to erode years of cooperation on financial regulations forged after the 2008 crisis. European Parliament members are traveling to Washington this week to meet with top lawmakers and other officials, where they can air their concerns about the U.S. commitment to international rules. The meetings come amid moves by the Trump administration and Congress to roll back bank regulations. The recommendations, especially coming from the Treasury Department, are constituting a kind of America First policy in financial regulation, said Marcus Ferber, a vice chairman of the Parliament's Economic Committee. This is a considerable deviation from our international agreed standards, he said. We have the feeling that the United States is going to leave this path. In withdrawing from the landmark Paris Climate Accord in a speech last month, Trump declared that he was elected to represent Pittsburgh, not Paris, underscoring his vow to put America's interests above global concerns. For EU bank regulators, it was a curious choice of locations for Trump. It was in Pittsburgh, at a G20 meeting in 2009. Where world leaders recognized the need to work together to rescue and regulate the financial markets after the worst crash since the Great Depression. For us, Pittsburgh is still valid, said Ferber, a German representing Bavaria who is aligned with Chancellor Angela Merkel. Facing financial instability and mounting unemployment in the US and EU, the world leaders agreed in September 2009 to require banks to bulk up on capital so they could withstand future shocks. They committed to centralize trading in derivatives, the unregulated financial instruments that helped spark the credit meltdown. And they approved the overhaul of rules for executive compensation that had encouraged excessive risk-taking. The U.S. House passed legislation last month that would gut many of the post-crisis banking reforms, and Trump's Treasury Department is proposing to curtail some key regulations. Trump, in setting the tone at the top, is clearing the way for a weakening of crucial regulations, said Martin Wheatley, who headed the UK Financial Conduct Authority until September 2015. A breakdown in regulatory cooperation risks seeding the next financial crisis, he said. We shouldn't forget that. During their meetings in Washington and New York this week, the Europeans will voice those worries to American financial regulators and lawmakers. Among them, Jay Clayton, the chairman of the SEC, Christopher Giancarlo, the head of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and Stanley Fischer, the vice chair of the Federal Reserve Board. They're also scheduled to meet with officials from Trump's National Economic Council. On Capitol Hill, the members of the European Parliament will talk with powerful lawmakers, including Senate Banking Chairman Mike Crapo and Representative Peter Roskam, chairman of the House Ways and Means Subcommittee for Tax Policy, before heading to New York. The U.S.EU divergence on regulation focuses on agreements reached since the financial crisis in the city of Basel on the Rhine River in Switzerland. There, U.S. banking regulators and their counterparts from around the world have drawn up banking rules for countries to follow. The U.S. new hesitancy to advance Basel regulations has Ferber and other Europeans displeased. Ferber mentioned two items in the Basel banking standards: one, called the Net Stable Funding Ratio, which tries to ensure that banks have enough liquidity during a crisis, and another aimed at reining in trading risks for the lenders. In a June report, the U.S. Treasury Department recommended delaying implementation of both standards, saying these regulations would pile unnecessary burdens on banks. In a July 12 speech, the governor of France's central bank, François Villeroy de Gallier, criticized the Treasury. Such changes would be completely different and would be a source of great concern for all, he said. Any temptation of competitive deregulation would be a lose-lose game, which would increase the risk of a new financial crisis. International cooperation on financial sector regulation is our common good. Nicolas Veron, a senior fellow at Bruegel, a Brussels-based think tank, says the Europeans are overreacting. There is no real evidence that the U.S. is ripping up agreements, said Veron, a visiting fellow at the Peterson Institute in Washington. The Treasury report was hardly draconian, he said, and many of the people Trump has appointed to regulate financial markets are considered moderates, including Rand Quarles, who has been picked to become the Fed's top regulator. The Europeans are right to complain about trade and climate, but at this point I wouldn't extend that to financial regulation, Veron said. Yet for global financial companies, antipathy over financial regulation poses a major risk: retaliation. In November, the European Union proposed to force U.S. banks with significant operations on the continent to establish separate holding companies to keep capital and liquidity in the bloc. Banks are concerned that they will be hit with higher costs and decreased flexibility in times of market stress. Bankers saw the move as retaliation for a U.S. regulation that required all the largest banks to set up holding companies. U.S. companies are closely watching to see if EU officials go ahead with that move. I do fear that we are on the edge of the precipice with regulations fragmenting, said Jeremy Newell, an executive managing director at the Clearing House, a lobbying group for global banks, who was also speaking in Paris. That, Newell said, would have enormous costs. Trump boosts outreach to GOP senators as healthcare bill stalls. President Donald Trump is ramping up his outreach to Senate Republicans as their Obamacare repeal effort hangs in the balance, dialing up an undecided conservative senator over the weekend and inviting several other key GOP senators to the White House for a private meeting Monday night. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said Monday that Trump plans to host some Republicans to discuss the repeal push. Spicer didn't disclose the invite list, but Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn of Texas, Sens. John Thune of South Dakota, Lamar Alexander of Tennessee, Roy Blunt of Missouri, Steve Daines of Montana and James Lankford of Oklahoma are among the senators who will attend, according to Republican aides. But even more conspicuous is the list of senators who aren't going to the White House on Monday evening. Aides to key swing vote Republicans including Rob Portman of Ohio, Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, Jeff Flake of Arizona, Cory Gardner of Colorado and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin said they were not attending. "This was set up when we thought we were going to be voting this week," Cornyn said of the White House sit-down. "So it's the president's invitation, and we're accepting his invitation." Cornyn acknowledged that the guests included few if any of the GOP swing votes Trump still must corral to help pass the repeal bill. "It's kind of an interesting invitation list, but again, I didn't craft it." Still, Trump also spoke privately via phone with Lee on Saturday, according to a spokesman for the conservative Utah senator. Lee is pressing to include a full version of legislation he authored that would allow insurers to sell cheaper health coverage that doesn't comply with key Obamacare regulations, as long as the companies offer plans that do. The senator told Trump that he was still undecided on the latest version of the GOP repeal measure. Two GOP senators, Sens. Rand Paul of Kentucky and Susan Collins of Maine, have said they won't vote to begin debate on the bill. Senator Orrin Hatch, Utah, the chairman of the Finance Committee, was at the White House earlier Monday to meet with administration staff on health care and other topics, he said. "I think we have the chance to make it more palatable," Hatch said Monday. "I don't see how it hurts anything except it shortens the so-called August recess." Spicer insists Trump Jr. meeting was only about adoption. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer returned to the podium to brief reporters on Monday, but the briefing remained off camera and out of the public eye. The White House has not held a televised briefing since June 29. It was Spicer's first time addressing reporters in the briefing room since June 26. Here are the key moments from his return to the podium, which lasted about 30 minutes. Spicer defended Donald Trump Jr.'s decision to meet a Russian lawyer last year in hopes of collecting opposition research about Hillary Clinton. But his defense of the meeting became convoluted. "It is quite often for people who are given information during the heat of a campaign to ask what that is. That's what simply he did," Spicer said. "The president's made it clear through his tweet. And there was nothing, as far as we know, that would lead anyone to believe that there was anything except for a discussion about adoption and the Magnitsky Act." Emails released by Trump Jr. show that the meeting was planned with the intention of obtaining damaging information about Clinton. Spicer referred other questions to outside counsel. He said President Trump has confidence in his counsel, Mark Kasowitz, after it was revealed that Kasowitz sent profanity-laced emails to someone who had suggested he resign. Spicer noted that Kasowitz had apologized. Trump will host senators at the White House Monday to discuss health care, Spicer said. "There's been a very robust discussion with House and Senate leadership," he said. "We're going to do what we did last time." The president spent more time on health care this weekend than on promoting a golf tournament, Spicer said after a reporter noted that the president tweeted 6 times about the U.S. Women's Open that was held at one of his properties. "Sending off a tweet takes 5-10 seconds, Spicer said. "I just told you that he's been extremely engaged in talking to different senators," Spicer said. "We continue to do what we have to do and we'll make it work." Spicer defended Trump's family members for manufacturing some products overseas, despite the fact that this is Made in America week at the White House. "There are certain things that we may not have the capacity to do here in terms of having a plant or factory that can do it," Spicer said. "Some industries, some products may not have the scalability or the demand here in this country. Think about all of the things that we buy every day. Of course there's a market because we depend in this country for so many goods and services, some of which are made in America, some of which aren't. Obviously we want to create an environment in which more things are made here, more things are exported from here," he added. Regarding reports Trump asked British Prime Minister Theresa May to help boost his popularity there, Spicer demurred. "I believe that I'm not going to comment on rumored leaked conversations," Spicer said. He added Trump looks forward to visiting the UK. He would not say whether the United States will recertify Iran's compliance with the nuclear deal. He said an announcement will come shortly from the State Department but reiterated Trump's opposition to the deal. Trump's Voter Integrity Commission only wants public information from states, Spicer said. He said there had been a miscommunication regarding the group's efforts. The commission is slated to hold its first meeting on Wednesday.